Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of CTLN Opinion Plus. As you know, this is a space for our conversations and our opinions and where we talk about the issues for the Latino community. Today we are talking about homelessness, and we are joined by the Executive Director of Hands for Hartford, Barbara Shaw. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on a very sunny day. It's so lovely outside. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that Hands for Hartford is doing, and a little bit about the Faces for Homelessness Bureau as well?
Sure. So Hands On Hartford's a 52-year-old Hartford-based nonprofit. We like to say that we serve neighbors, connect communities, and engage volunteers. And in our Serving Neighbors space, we focus on food and housing and health supports to better support our neighbors who often have complicated lives. So we have a variety of services that I'm sure I'll get to at some point during the show, and volunteering and donation opportunities at our Center for Community here in the vibrant neighborhood of Parkville at 55 Bartholomew Avenue. One of the projects that we're involved with and are really proud of is the Faces of Homelessness Speakers Bureau that's been based at Hands on Hartford for about 8 years now. It's based on a national model and is kind of what it sounds like. We have folks with lived experience with homelessness, either current or past, who go out there and share their experience with folks in groups all over Connecticut.
I wondered, what was some of the difficulties that you had in terms of providing services, food during and aid during the pandemic? I'm sure it must have been extremely challenging.
Well, I have to say I am super proud of our team. We didn't stop one day. We were open every single day during the pandemic and, of course, beyond. And we didn't stop serving face-to-face either, which was kind of rare in this human service space. We're very fortunate that we own our own center and are able to sort of control it and to have modified it to make it as safe as possible during that terrible time that we all went through as a nation and as a people, both certainly locally as well. And so we naturally had to pivot and change a lot of what we did to make it safer, but we continued to provide a whole array of services, including face-to-face time with people. There was a dizzying array of benefits available to people, but it was very complicated for some people to understand how to get their stimulus checks, for example, or how to apply for unemployment, how to make sure that their rights were being protected under eviction moratoriums and that sort of thing. We did move, though, in our pantry to give out the bags of groceries at the door. We normally have people come in and shop. We have a big emphasis on healthy food choices, seeing nursing students for health checks and all that. And during the worst of the COVID crisis, we naturally had to change that. We also, for our meal program, which moved up here to our center from downtown Hartford, went to providing it through to-go meals, although we always had some opportunities for people to come in, especially those living outside, because during the pandemic, it was extremely difficult for people who are unsheltered, unhoused, to even access something as simple as a bathroom or a place to charge their cell phone or a place to wash up. So we're really grateful that our team just hung in there and served people literally 24/7 every day during the pandemic and beyond.
I'm really glad that centers like yours were open. It's not a secret that the homeless population is often the forgotten population in this country. And I think people forget that anybody at any point could experience displacement and homelessness, regardless of where they come from. Yeah. And in terms of providing healthcare, I'm sure you guys are back to running that now that the country is opening up a bit more. Can you tell us about how someone could get healthcare provided, and This is a very hard community to reach. How are you able to reach them? And not all of them speak English or Spanish. How do you make it that you're more accessible? What is your outreach like?
So I would say a large portion of the folks we serve are from the Latino community.
Mm,
Many of our staff are bilingual, bicultural, and that certainly helps a great deal. And in terms of health supports, we certainly do a lot of referral work and advocacy work, making sure that people are able to access the type of care that they need. Our housing services are almost all tailored for people with complicated both homeless histories as well as healthcare situations. And our staff work very intensively to take people for appointments, often stay with them, advocate, do a lot of health education. And then here at our center, we'll have nursing students and others come in to provide blood sugar and blood pressure checks and all those kind of things. We, of course, too, during the COVID crisis and now have had to focus a lot on testing and on vaccine accessibility. We've done some testing clinics and vaccine clinics here at Hands On Hartford. And so that, of course, has been very helpful. We try very hard, too, when we bring in outreach workers, when we've had mammogram vans and all of that, to try to make sure that they have folks who speak not just English to make it more accessible for folks.
good. That's so good to hear, especially that you're providing mammograms. I think that's something that's often overlooked is women's health care. So it's wonderful that
Absolutely.
you are able to provide that.
Well, we're very fortunate. We're in, Hartford's a relatively small community, but we have some wonderful medical providers here who work in great partnership with us and others. Our homeless outreach team, we just started a new collaborative homeless outreach team. And one of our partners, Wheeler Clinic, provides primary and behavioral health care services. And one of the things we do is when they go out to find folks who are literally homeless, unsheltered homeless, is be able to get them in very quickly to see practitioners in one of their centers in Hartford. So that's extremely helpful. And then our other partner, Greater Hartford Home Harm Reduction Coalition, has a nurse on staff who can go out with the teams when they go out in the evenings, early mornings, and weekends and do some right on the spot checking in with folks in terms of, in the winter, of course, frostbite, wound care. Folks are ill, showing signs of COVID or other both acute and chronic conditions, and make sure they're getting the basic care and referrals and immediate access to life-saving care as needed. So we just know that it's like taking care to people more, right? That we just have to make sure that people have easier access to all kinds of care and also receive advocacy. We know that for many people of color, and especially women of color, it's not uncommon for their health concerns to be discounted. And so we want to make sure that when that's happening, that they have an advocate who can help them sort of navigate that and frankly, turn it around so that they get the life-saving care that they need.
I'm sure during the winter it's also much more challenging. I mean, winters on the East Coast are very, very different and very hard. Um, what happens if there isn't housing available? What do you provide for the community and for these people that have no choice but to sleep on a park bench in 10-degree weather?
So, the issue of housing instability and homelessness is, as you said, one of our most difficult challenges, I think, as a nation, and one that we all really struggle with. And, in Connecticut, we have done certainly a good job over the last 8 years. I think the use of shelters is down something like 57% over the last 8 years. That being said, we know that on any given day, there are individuals and families entering homelessness. And right now, I checked in with our manager of our managed services, Janet Bermudez, and she was telling me that Right now, all the shelter beds that they were trying to access, I think it was last night or the night before, are full. And in the winter, we have some additional shelter beds available, but not enough. So there were literally people living outside in the winter, and there are certainly many folks living outside in the summer. And quite candidly, a night like last night, where granted it was only, I think, in the low 50s or upper 40s, but when folks, it came off of a heat wave here. So when you have folks who don't have a lot of possessions, they can't carry a lot of possessions, so maybe they've stripped off their warmer things and they're wearing their summer clothes, and suddenly they get a cold night, right? So it's those kind of things that are really challenging. And going back to our Faces of Homelessness Speakers Bureau, I find it always really moving to hear the stories of what it's like to try to manage all that and try to, in most cases, try to put your life back together or try to get to a next place. Or for parents who have children who are homeless, it's just heartbreaking. We have one of our speakers who talks about her experience spending the night on a park bench, and her two little daughters having them she put them kind of under the bench, then kind of put a blanket over the bench completely. So it felt like a little tent to them. They were quite young at the time. And then, of course, she had to sit up all night on the bench to stay awake, to be protective of them. So it's terribly challenging. And so one of the goals of the street outreach is to, first of all, reduce risk, make sure that people are safe, right? The second one is to definitely get people on a path towards housing. And to the degree that we can access it, some short-term shelter before they can access housing and be back in more stable housing in some cases for the first time.
The Faces of Homelessness Bureau is it's a good. I think it's a really great tool that you guys have. It's oftentimes we clump this community together and we don't give them a face. So it's good to hear that those voices are there, that people have experienced it, and what their experiences were, because it's heartbreaking. It is very heartbreaking. I think I have time just for one last question, but what, in your opinion, how can we fix homelessness in this country? It's just, again, it is heartbreaking, and I would like a solution one day.
Well, I think it's probably twofold. One, you just touched on one of the issues, which is for folks to really understand and to fight the notion that homelessness is somehow individual people's faults, or that it's shameful or something like that. We want to make sure that people understand that these are our neighbors who don't have a home, who don't have a safe space. And then to make sure that we have sufficient resources. And here's the reality: homelessness is a man-made, human-made situation, especially in a country like the US. And that means we can change it. And we know the main reason for homelessness is lack of affordable housing and lack of equitable and rights around housing. So we can definitely change that. And so we always encourage folks, our Faces of Homelessness speakers always encourage people to reach out, to be advocates, to talk to your legislative folks, and to advocate for change so that more of our neighbors have a safe place to call home every single night.
And might I add one thing, to be compassionate. These are people as well. They're not meant to be looked over or ignored. It's important to view these people as people, as humans, as people with emotions. Yeah. Well, thank you for speaking with me, Barbara. This has been a really great conversation. I'm really glad we had a chance to talk, and thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you. Thanks for including Hands On Hartford on your show today. We appreciate it.
That was all for today. Thank you for joining us. Join us for another episode in 2 weeks. For more information about our discussion today, check out our web story at ctlatinonews.com. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at ctlatinonews and Instagram at ct_Latino News. I'm Savani Campos. with CTLN Opinion Plus. See you next time.